What's happening, everybody? Back at you again with the next review in the Indiana Jones series, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Once again directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Harrison Ford, Kate Capshaw, Ke Huy Quan, Amrish Puri, and many others. This film is obviously seen as the black sheep of the original three Indiana Jones films because they say it's the weakest. But then again, what's that really saying? I mean, look, I'll get into my thoughts on Temple of Doom in just a little bit, but a lot of interesting history with this film in particular, because obviously Lawrence Kasdan no longer was writing this film. He refused to come back after Raiders of the Lost Ark. And this one was written by Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz, the husband and wife duo who helped make American Graffiti and Star Wars such a great success in the screenplay area. And I don't really think there's much of a difference, except in maybe a few areas, and we'll get into that. But this really is probably the darkest of all the Indiana Jones films, both tonally and some of the imagery that pops up in this film. So intense to the point that this film eventually constituted the PG-13 rating that Spielberg insisted on himself. Because I don't know why, Spielberg really doesn't like this movie, but I feel like he really sells himself short because there are so many great ideas in this film, and they're executed so well for the most part. And I'll get in right from the beginning, which starts in Shanghai in 1935, because this is a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you're introduced to Indiana Jones with a musical number, Anything Goes. Really kind of interesting, and really sets off this Indiana Jones film, sets it apart from its predecessor. Or should I say, never mind, I'm not going to get into the time logistics, but regardless, you see Harrison Ford walk on the screen as Indiana Jones, and it's very reminiscent of Dr. No and James Bond, and I love that they're playing around with referencing James Bond, which obviously we'll talk more about in the next movie. And just this whole power game between him and these dealers here, at least that's what I assume they are, and they want the gem from him. And this really, once again, shows you that Indy might not be the greatest guy, because he grabs Willie, who's played by Kate Capshaw, obviously, and holds a fork to her ribcage and threatens to kill her if they don't give him back the diamond. And really, it's just absolutely brutal. It shows that this man takes no prisoners sort of mentality, though we all know deep down, I don't think he really wants to kill her, right? But still, it's really played for a lot of great tension. And then, of course, I love the spinning table where he's given the diamond and then they spin the antidote to him. And it's just really, once again, the way they play with power dynamics in the scene. But I think this whole setup is so clever, especially the ensuing action sequence where he throws a kebab into a guy's chest and kills him. I mean, come on, that's insane. And of course, the rolling gong is really one of the most brilliant set pieces. And then, of course, before all that, them losing the diamond in the vial within the crowd of people and trying to find it amongst all the chaos. It's just a brilliant set piece to play around with, and I think Spielberg really opens up this sort of sandbox to really kind of play with these sort of ideas and create a really killer action sequence. And of course, obviously, when it comes to Kate Capshaw as Willie, almost immediately something's not right with her. And she starts whining within the first few minutes she's introduced in this movie. And yeah, I mean, one of the biggest downfalls to Temple of Doom is the character of Willie, who I think is easily one of the weakest characters in the Indiana Jones franchise. She complains, she bitches this entire movie, and it gets annoying real fast, and that holds true for the beginning of this movie as well. Not a huge Willie fan, but even then, I don't think she's completely devoid of great moments, which we will get into. But really, the true highlight of this movie is when we get introduced to Ke Huy Quan as Short Round, the role that broke him out to stardom, you could say. At least the role that he was remembered for up until last year when he won an Oscar for Waymond Wang in Everything Everywhere All at Once, which, watching this movie, it's crazy to think, it's like, this kid has won an Oscar. I mean, I couldn't be happy for the guy. I mean, what a find. And really just what a wonderful person that we've been blessed to know throughout his entire journey. And I mean, even from this film, the promise is there of a truly tremendous actor. And I love Short Round in this. He's one of my favorite sidekicks in the entire Indiana Jones franchise. Just everything says, okay, hold on to your potatoes, you know, and he starts driving the car. Dr. Jones, this is no time for love. I mean, you gotta love this kid. And he isn't just an annoying, like, he's way less annoying than Willie is. I mean, let's be honest, Short Round is a badass in this movie, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But also, did you guys know that Dan Aykroyd was in this movie? I didn't even know that, and I just watched this like last weekend. Anyway, yeah, they escape from these gangsters, but do they really? Because they're about to get on this plane, and they think they've escaped, and then you see on the door says, Lao Che, and you realize that they are not in a good position. And I love the ensuing scene where they're in the plane, and all the pilots jump out and leave them there. And there is Indy, Short Round, and Willie trying to not crash into the oncoming mountain. And I will say, a lot of people take issue with the scene following this, where they go on the raft and then they fall down all these ridiculous heights. They slide down a mountain. Yeah, it's not realistic, but I don't know. I think it's done in such a way that it doesn't really bother me that much, but I could see where people would take issue with it, because it really is kind of dumb. But with that kind of logic, I am a bit consistent with that when it comes to the fridge scene in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so they find themselves in India, and then they stumble upon a village. And this is where the movie begins to get really dark, if it wasn't fairly dark to begin with, because you learn that this village, all the children had been stolen, and no one knows where they went. And it's really dark to think, you know, just insinuating the fact that all these children had disappeared all of a sudden. And I love how you come to this village, it's so drab, it's so dreary, you really feel the dread almost immediately. Once you get here, and Willie being annoying, not eating the food, but, you know, that's a whole other thing. So, yeah, so then this kid comes back almost on the verge of death and reveals that basically all these kids have been being used for slave labor, which is pretty dark to begin with. Maybe I can see why Spielberg took issue with that, but I don't know, like, I think the fact that this film tackles these really dark ideas makes me appreciate it all the more, because they didn't have to go that hard, and they did. And I respect the audacity of the narrative decision to do this, because it really does, even though this was not a place that Indy wanted himself to be in, like, you understand why he would go on this quest to save these children. And of course you get so many great lines, you know, like when that beautiful shot by the amazing Douglas Slocum, where him and Short Round are looking out at the sky at night, and he's just like asking him whatever, you know, what the meaning of, I forgot what it was, but he just answers him, "Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory." I mean, just one of the most iconic lines in the Indiana Jones franchise. But really, I just love the chemistry between him and Ke Huy Quan, because it really feels like they have this natural bond together, like the character of Indy and Short Round, where it's revealed he found him as an orphan on the street trying to pickpocket him, and you really he really does feel like a great mentor. Especially the scene where they're playing cards together is always great. And he's like accused, "You cheat!" You know? It's just so great. And Willie, of course. There is some great stuff with her, even in that scene, as annoying as she's being, with the snake. But she keeps being scared of, like, all these things, and then the snake ends up on her and she doesn't even see it. It's a great subversion on the previous joke. It's just great setup, great comedy writing. Though most of the stuff with her whining about the elephants just grinds my gears in the worst way possible, like she does for most of this movie. But still, we get to this very lavish temple, and you're kind of wondering what's going on with this place. And we get introduced to the Maharaja, who's like a kid or whatever, and we get introduced to, let's say, very interesting Indian cuisine. Look, I know people take offense to the scene, and understandably so, because it kind of treats Indian people like they're uncivilized savages, that they're going to eat monkey brains. And I'm pretty sure if you ate a monkey's brain, it would probably make you go insane. And that's not me trying to rhyme, I just couldn't think of a better word to say. Anyway, yeah, it's not the best cultural representation, and I do take issue with the scene as well. It doesn't completely derail the movie for me, but it certainly isn't the best look, and I can understand why anyone would take issue in the scene. But the scene that follows it, kind of that will they or won't they situation between Indy and Willie, is really great. The dialogue is so innuendo-laced that it's funny, it's clever, it's witty, it's sexy. I mean, everything about it. It's a really great interaction, and just them trying to like make up their minds whether they're going to go bone each other. I mean, it's a really, really fun scene. And then of course we get them coming after them, and the fight in Indy's room with Short Round. And the guy, when he like, this is what I'm saying, like, it's unbelievable, like, the stuff that they actually decided to put in this movie. Like, when he ties the whip onto the ceiling fan and he hangs the guy from the ceiling. It's like, damn, they went there? But I think it makes that scene all the more impactful and effective. And once again, that banter is always so much fun between Indy and Willie in that scene. And then, of course, they randomly find this entrance that's going to take them to a cave, because I guess all temples in India have caves inside them? I don't know. But they, of course, we get introduced to the scene with the famous booby trap, the wall closing down and coming in on them with the spikes. And I just love him and Short Round's interaction, because that's the thing. Short Round will do something, right, that puts them in danger. But in this case, Indy told him to stand at the wall, and he runs to the wall. He's like, "You told me to stay there. I did what you told me." And it's just so funny. And then Willie comes along trying to follow suit, and she just screws everything up unintentionally. It's the most annoying thing ever. I just think the writing for her, portraying her as a incompetent ditz, I just don't think works. I think hinders the narrative, but there is still some funny interactions to be had within that, when she's like trying to push the wall back in, and of course I just love the way they build tension in that scene. And of course that last minute moment when Indy goes under the door, and the door's just about to close, but he grabs his hat. I mean, that's just classic Indiana Jones right there. And then we get introduced to satanic cult rituals, and we get introduced to the main villain of the story, Mola Ram, who I like Mola Ram, like, he's cool. I never thought he was much of a villain. I mean, especially coming off of Belloc. I mean, there's not even any competition. Not really much to him, though he is intimidating. And my goodness, this is what I mean when this film gets dark, and they really push these creative visuals and ideas with this really hard edge sense of visual and tone, where basically they're dipping this guy in a fire, and he rips his heart out of his chest with his hand, and yet his whole chest is still intact while he's being lowered in the lava, and he doesn't die. I mean, stuff like that really makes Temple of Doom such a creative breath of fresh air for this franchise, even though it might not be as solid as Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think it's stuff like that that really sets it apart from not just Raiders, but all of the movies in the franchise. And then, of course, you know, they get caught, and one of the darkest moments in the Indiana Jones series is when they make Indiana Jones drink that blood, and he turns evil, and you're not sure if he's completely lost or not. And yet again, here comes Short Round breaking out of his confinement and saving Indy's ass. I mean, Short Round saves everybody's ass like 5 times in this movie. This kid's a badass. I mean, how can you not love him? And of course, just poking him with the fire, he not only saves him and Willie in that scene, but you get a really sweet moment where he hugs him. He's like, "Indy, my friend." I mean, it's just so sweet, and it almost brings a tear to my eye, that scene. I really love, once again, the connection between those two. And of course, in the midst of all this, Indiana Jones finds the Sankara stones, one of which they need for that village. And you really get a lot of great ensuing action from this point onward. Once Short Round saves him, and once they free the children, because you find them like locked in cages and in chains. Like, it really is, once again, I mean, this is no, kid stuff. It really is very dark, and probably one of the wildest ways you could think of for this franchise. But my goodness, I love this scene, especially when they're breaking out and escaping. Especially John Williams' score, once again, Academy Award nominated score for this film as well. And I just love the Slave Children Crusade. That's like one of my favorite themes that he's done, and really probably the standout theme from Temple of Doom. And it is just absolutely awesome. And then, of course, the fight with the other guy who's like in charge of the slave labor on the conveyor belt, who is the same actor who portrayed the German in the plane fight sequence in Raiders, which I think is really cool. And then, of course, Short Round's doing his own thing, fighting the Maharaja. And yet again, like, another great idea is voodoo. When the Maharaja's like sticking the pin in the doll and Indy's getting tortured, and Spielberg keeps amping up the tension every second during the scene. Is Indy going to get crushed by the rolling press there? It's just so brilliant. And then the way it wraps up with the guy's cape getting stuck in the conveyor belt and getting squished to death. I mean, it really is just such a gratifying action fight scene. And then, of course, we get the minecart chase, which is so cool. I mean, one of the most interesting sequences in any Indiana Jones movie. Sure, it might not be as good as the desert chase sequence, but still, there's so much to love, so much creativity going on. And once again, I just love the way this wraps up. I love John Williams' score underneath this. Really one of his finest moments as a composer in that scene particularly. And then, of course, you get the finale with the bridge. But even before that, I love little callbacks, like when there's the two swordsmen start swinging their swords and Indiana Jones reaches for his gun. He's like, I guess I don't have it. Like, great reference to Raiders. And a nice callback in a way that doesn't feel really heavy-handed or ruins the continuity whatsoever. Because it would be in line with his character that he would try to pull the gun on them, right? If that's what happened in Raiders. But yeah, you get to the bridge scene, which I think is absolutely amazing. The way Indy cuts the bridge in half, ties himself on, and just that ensuing fight with Mola Ram is just filled with so much tension that just builds throughout the entire scene until the British Army finally comes in and saves everyone. Of course, we need colonizers to save the Indian people, go figure. But anyway, so amazing. The ending to this film, which I think is even better than Raiders in that sense. This is such a gratifying, rousing ending where they go back to the village and everything is just so bright, so happy, all the children have returned. And that's the thing that's so great about the scene. I just love the way they play with the bright colored clothes at the end. A detail that's so noticeable yet hidden in plain sight. I mean, it adds so much to the thematic conclusion of this film, one that was so dark and foreboding, and yet has such a sense of adventure and fun to it, which I think makes it so great. The humor throughout it is really, besides Willie, it hits almost all the time, especially with Short Round. And that's the thing, like, compared to Marion, I mean, obviously character-wise, there's no contest, but just the connection between that two, besides the couple scenes that I mentioned, like, it's just not very prevalent. And so, I don't know, I just don't think this romance works as well for multiple reasons, but if you really had to break it down, even if you don't like Willie, I think you can agree that the romance is not perhaps the strongest dynamic that has been featured in the Indiana Jones movies. And once again, I mean, there's so much to love about this film. Short Round, the setting is amazing, the really creative set pieces with the cult and everything about it. I just think this film is so dark in a way that really it sticks out like a sore thumb in Spielberg's filmography, sure, but I think it works well for what they were going here, and I certainly don't agree with him saying it's one of his worst movies. It's certainly better than Crystal Skull. And yeah, I absolutely love this movie, Willie Beside. I just think there's so much to adore from an action standpoint. As I said, it's filled to the brim with ideas, and I think, once again, we got to give this cast and crew a lot of credit, where credit's due, for creating another timeless action-adventure movie. So while I don't love it as much as Raiders, I'm still going to give it a very high 9 out of 10. I mean, I could put this movie on any time, and I'm just going to be loving it every time I watch it. So yeah, I mean, what do you guys think of Temple of Doom? Is it still one of your favorites? Do you still love it? Maybe not as much as the other films, but just in general. And I can't wait to talk about The Last Crusade, because really another phenomenal film in this series that I can't wait to dive in and break down with you. That review should be up in a couple of days, so please stay on the lookout. And of course, if you like what I'm doing here, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. We're going to finish out this entire series, though we might get to Crystal Skull after Dial of Destiny. Sorry, I know that's weird. Maybe I'll explain it, but yeah, so that's going to be fun. And of course, stay tuned for my top 10 quotes from The Room. The anniversary's coming up, and I can't wait to talk about some of my favorite quotes of all time in general. So, of course, stay on the lookout. So much more great content coming this week. And, you know, no shortage here, especially this week. There's so much going on, so you're going to want to stay tuned for all of it. And until the next video, take it easy.